What's going on? Welcome back to the channel. So today when I talk to you about Lucid, I want to go over some expectations for this upcoming week, what might cause some volatility in the stock price, and go over everything else you need to know. But first, make sure you guys hit that thumbs up. And with that, let's get right to it. So starting off on a macro standpoint, not really much coming out on Monday. So that's going to be more of a technical driven day. And in Lucid's case, that should be fairly a-okay. So I'll go over the technicals near the end of the video. Tuesday going forward, we do have a lot of Fed speakers almost every single day. Yours truly, Powell, on Tuesday. So depending on what is stated, that could be very impactful to the broader market. We also do have various agencies reporting manufacturing data, such as Richmond on Tuesday, S&P Global on Thursday. So a lot of people can be really watching that data, which is from July, as how impactful the tariffs have been on the market. So that one's going to be a very hot one to really watch for. And then aside from that, existing home sales, I don't really see this coming in negative, only because of the data from last week. So forecast for that is 4 million. Aside from that, though, you do have the Chicago Fed National Activity Index. If it does kind of come in lower than the forecast, which is currently negative 0.1, that does signal a lot of slowing growth, anticipated at least. So that one, again, is going to be a hot one alongside the S&P Global Composite Manufacturing and Services. And then not really much craziness on Friday. So let me know your general thoughts on that. So it should make for a very interesting and volatile week. And then speaking of tariffs, as I mentioned, we could be getting some updates associated to Europe and Japan. So depending on if we get a deal, that could really move the market higher, or flip side, it could really kind of break it down a little bit, because I think Trump started some stuff with Europe a little bit on Friday, but luckily enough, the market didn't really overly care, but still something to keep in mind. Aside from that, though, a lot of big companies unveiling their earnings that could really move the market, such as Tesla and Google. And I think going into Tesla's earnings, I think it's kind of a win-win scenario for Lucid. And what I mean by that is, of course, a lot of people are going to be looking at the key metrics for Tesla, but more specifically, future guidance. Because Tesla, for those of you that actually look at their earnings, their metrics, like, they have sucked the last 2-3 earnings. What has saved them is their future guidance. So no different than this time. If they give good future guidance, then essentially that would trickle down to other EVs as a very strong positive. If they give negative future guidance, then normally as well, that would really trickle down to other EVs. But essentially, with the new deal that was announced with Uber, I feel like there is sufficient amount of demand. So even if Tesla comes out and says, hey, because of the tariffs, we anticipate a slowing and blah, 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 all that type of stuff that nobody would want to hear, that would be very detrimental to like Rivian, Lucid, and others. But when it comes down to, like I said, with that recent deal with Uber, that pretty much gives a certain level of just demand, right? And even aside from that, Lucid already does have that 50,000 order to the Saudi government. And as far as I'm aware, they haven't really started to fulfill those. So ultimately, over the next like 6 years, we have 70,000 for the most part in demand, possibly more. So even if Lucid doesn't get any customers, no actual private or public individual buys any Lucid vehicles, there is at least like a 10-15% annual growth just based on the 70,000 from the Saudi government and Uber. So again, I think going into Tesla's earnings, it is a win-win, and most likely you could see some new analyst ratings. So ever since Lucid's big announcement, you've seen a rush of new analyst ratings, somewhat mixed. So you have a 230 TD Cowen and you have a $3 Morgan Stanley hold. That was done by Adam Jonas. $7 buy, that is Lantenberg Michael, who has a 46% success rating. Stifel, $3, and then $1 sell. That was done by Bank of America. I believe Evercore, that one was done prior to that big news, I think, if I remember correctly. But nonetheless, though, this is kind of what analysts are thinking. And over the last 3 months, $2.92 is that consensus, representing almost a 4% downside. And then specific to Lucid, this is what they have for events. So nothing overly crazy, no planned interviews or any SEC filings or any fireside chats. So you never know. I think Lucid has been really wanting to do those. Clearly Mark's done 2 or 3 over the last week. So when it comes down to it, that might be more coming down the pipeline. But essentially, I think from now going forward, people are just going to be waiting for Lucid's upcoming earnings. And in my opinion, I think that there is still some big announcements to be had. So that level of optimism and speculation could keep Lucid kind of at these levels, if not a little bit higher, as FOMO might kick in, starting to kind of get closer to their earnings. But aside from that though, shorts. 31.4% of the free float is being shorted, so that's what we're going into this upcoming week with. Works out to be 387.13 million shares overall are being shorted. Friday was rather abnormal, so they did return 3.46 million shares. So they kind of just sat back and just relaxed. They didn't really have to do all that much. But essentially, with Lucid closing at 304, that does mean that the $3 strike prices and below are in the money. So this is all the options that was from last week. So you do have 9,000 at that 2, 39,000 at that 250, and then 50,000 at that 3. So essentially, when it comes down to market makers, they will have to cover that because they don't have a lot of volatile stocks such as Lucid in their inventory. So they're going to have to go to the open market to actually buy that. So when it comes down to this, for face value, it's almost about 9 million shares that does need to be covered. Looking at the secondary market, some transactions from Friday, you do see some random ones after hours. Clearly, in my opinion, any institution buying after hours on Friday, which is normally a quiet period, is covering options. So you have 1.1, 1.5, couple 1.5s right there, 17.4. Looking at the dark pool, there wasn't really any kind of crazy ones there. So most likely there is still a lot of shares that do need to be covered that could really push Lucid higher first thing. So going into this upcoming week with it at 304, it is trading between this pivot and this S1. So 290 is a strong support, and it did bounce off of that general area on Friday. So just watch for that to be kind of that line in the sand, because if it does unfortunately fail to hold that, then you'll see 277, and then unfortunately I think sentiment might kick in, profit taking, and then it might kind of pull a little bit lower. So really watch for that 290 to hold. Flip side, 311, 331, 344, and then 365 as various resistance / targets. So I do feel going into this upcoming week, things are going to be looking pretty good. And hopefully, ideally, best case scenario, Tesla does have some pretty good earnings, good future guidance, and really pushes Lucid higher even more than what has happened. On a technical standpoint, I'll give you a quick summary of this. So the only negative to really bring up is the fact that Lucid is overbought. But before even this went up like crazy, it was already overbought. So nothing really to worry about. What that does mean, though, is a first sign of weakness, whether it be specific to Lucid or just the broader market. You could see a little bit of a pullback, so just kind of be aware of that. But as far as right now, it is above all the key pivotal moving averages. And yeah, so things are looking still pretty a-okay. Just going back over here, just watch for that 290. I want to stress that very, very much. In the past, though, we have seen Lucid shorts really double, triple, quadruple down to break Lucid on a technical standpoint. So just watch for that 290 ultimately. But aside from that, though, like I said, I think going into this upcoming week, I don't really anticipate any new news associated to Lucid, but just because of what was stated and all the big kind of data points, you could see Lucid push higher. I kind of disagree with a lot of individuals that is saying that it's going to instantly jump to kind of $5 going into the earnings. I don't see that being viable at all. I do feel for this week, it'll be between this R2 and this R1. So 331 to 344. I do feel like it'll be somewhere within that range. But ultimately, it's going to come down to the data that does come out, because let's say manufacturing data does come in a little bit lower than anticipated, people will be starting to freak out, and what that does mean for various data and how the future will be impacted because of tariffs. So again, that's going to be a very hot topic. You're going to see a lot of tariff talk almost every single day, which is going to be rather unfortunate, but nonetheless, I do feel it'll be kind of within this range. Post Lucid earnings, if they actually do have some good other announcements, such as various other partnerships, then yeah, realistically, I do feel post earnings, it could be around that $5 range, but I kind of tend to disagree with some individuals assuming it will be at 5 prior to earnings. So I just don't really see it being there, unless Lucid puts out some news, of course. So let me know your general thoughts on Lucid. Are you buying? Are you selling? What's your kind of general 2 cents on Lucid? And when it comes down to some of the recent analyst ratings, do you think that $7 is realistic? Do you see $2.30 realistic? So you're starting to see a divide, certain level of optimism, certain level of bearishness. I think moral of the story, as I've mentioned, the ball is in Lucid's court. They really need to kind of ramp up. That's now they have sufficient amount of orders through Uber, various other places as well, that now want their vehicles. They just have to ramp up. So let me know your general thoughts. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up. One final thing, pop over to my Patreon if you're looking for some solid buy signals on stocks, options, crypto, many of which have been absolutely on point. Definitely worthwhile to pop over there and take a look. With all that said, appreciate all of you watching.